So, Michelle, you're sitting in Paris, about to do some speaking, and we're coming into the last week of our course. And I know there are some things that you want to say in summation and in weaving our unit on inviting divergence into the rest. So I'm really eager to hear what that is.
Thank you. And I invite your contributions too, Ben. It's been such a delight to bring our knowledge and insights together and together with what we learn from participants. So let's do this together, but I will get us started.
Great.
All right. So what I'd like to do is back up a bit and do a really quick review of where we've been and how we find ourselves exploring inviting divergence as the final module. And so the starting point was recognizing that all living systems, all thriving living systems have these fertile conditions at play, that there are diverse parts that are supported and connected in patterns and structures of relationship in a way that enables the emergence of a new whole. And all of it is powered by life in a self-organizing manner. And when we explored what that looks like in human communities, we brought in this metaphor of a tree, that the whole process is held in stewardship, in a practice of stewardship. And that was our starting point, necessarily, that we prepare ourselves to be stewards or gardeners, cultivating the fertile conditions that are needed for life to thrive. And from there, we moved into sensing convergence practices and creating the conditions to be able to sense what is calling to us from our context and be in service of it. And down through the trunk of the tree, we explored designing for flow. What are the fertile conditions necessary so that our infrastructure and interactions support the flow of information and trust and decision-making, but most of all, the flow of life. And here we are now exploring what it means to be a diverse part, to bring our passion and to be nourished in the process, and to invite the passion and divergence of others who are collaborating with us. In aligning with life, we identified this happy collection of practices that help us tune in what we talked about as reverence and responsibility. And we can choose one or more of them. And these are individual and collective practices, but really of recognizing the vast complexity beyond our comprehension of anything that's alive. And despite that vastness, noticing that we feel called to respond, that reverence and responsibility. So in preparing ourselves to be responsive and reverent, then we moved into sensing convergence, and we added another layer of detail. What does that mean to notice what's calling to us and to respond to it? And many things call to us in the world. There are many wounds and many opportunities to be of service, but we can pay attention to which of them we're noticing most, which of them bring us the most energy. And in particular, tuning into what this place is asking of us. And then who else is feeling that pull? Who else is called together as a community? And what is the conversation we want to have? And here again, this is about more than the human conversation, but what is the conversation that our place and that the rest of creation is kind of inviting us into? And on that basis, what is the contribution that we who have been called together might make next? The best and simplest, maybe not the best, but just the most natural next step of making a contribution so that we can learn more about the calling and come together more fully as community. Right?
Nice.
Can you remember all this?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So from there, we explored designing for flow and drew on your wonderful metaphor of whitewater canoeing. And started by asking what is the adventure that we are on, that we have chosen to be on? Is it the whitewater version, or is it the slow and steady, or is it the helicopter to the end? What is this story of adventure and learning that we've chosen? And therefore, what are the ways of interacting that will support us in that, the systems of decision making and flow? And what's the lightest possible structure? And this is important, lightest possible, so that we're not weighted down and we don't end up in service of that structure and forget to be in service of life. We took inspiration from the meander map of the Mississippi River that shifts and changes over time. And so does our unfolding story. And so our systems and structure have to be responsive as well. All right. Is there anything you want to remind us of before we move on?
I'm enjoying the recapitulation, and I'm feeling the ways that everything you've said so far is all nested together, and I want to come back to that. But let's come back to that after you've gone the rest.
All right.
Of the way.
I like that you point out how it's nested together. That was the next thing we noticed, that there are parallels between these sets of fertile conditions. They inform each other. So our unfolding story is the story of our response to the calling, the story that's unfolding in the larger world around us. And our community comes together through the systems of interaction. We experimented with a sociocratic circle as a system of making decisions together, of discerning first. What is the contribution that we can make to this community of ours that's gathering? And it served not only to make the decisions, but to bring us together more fully as a community. And structure supports that contribution as well. So what we need next is that final row. What does that look like? What are those fertile conditions that help us invite our own divergence, but also the divergence of others that have been called together into community in service of something bigger than ourselves? And here's where it's interesting to notice that we are diverse parts within a system, a project, an organization, a community, but we are also a whole, each of us, unto ourselves. So we have our own story that we've been living out for our whole lives, and that we'll continue to live out after we've left a project or an organization or a community. And so this set of fertile conditions is also noticing how that story can be served by our participation in this larger project, and how we can be of service to it. So these are the fertile, as we invite the passion and the divergence of those who are involved, and we explore this for ourselves. What is my own unfolding story across my lifetime? What do I notice that brings me alive and helps me feel whole? And what gives me a sense of membership and belonging with people and place and project? And what talents and gifts can I contribute where I feel mastery? And that isn't to say that we're ever done, that we're the master and we've perfected our craft, but that the master crafts person always has beginner's mind. There's always more to learn. So, yeah, you want me to pause there? You got something?
Well, I know there's a little more to come, but in many ways, this course, the structure of this course that you're recapitulating here reflects so much of your own unfolding story. Of what you've been working on for many years. So what's in the center of that for you?
That's such a nice question and such a nice observation. I feel, as Lana would say, I feel seen. It's really nice. So I think what I might do is answer in the context of this full collection of fertile conditions, because it's been a dance across all of them throughout my life. I have always been drawn to a story of seeing the bigger picture, even as a child, and wanting to share that, share what I could see, and rarely finding others who also heard that calling and felt drawn to that conversation and community. So it was lonely for a long time. And in recent years, it's been so wonderful to find others who have heard that calling to notice patterns and worldviews and stories, and that there's life at the center of them, and to find systems and structures to support us in community, and to create my own, to create the Thrivable World platform as a place where others might gather in conversation, and we might figure out what is the contribution that we could make together. So that's a short answer. I hope it's short.
Well, and you've used metaphors like cambium and mycelium, that are the places that the life moves most through a living system.
Yeah. My company, I had a company for years that was called Cambium Consulting. And cambium is the living tissue just under the bark of a tree in the trunk where life flows through. So that was my vision, that it would be the practice ground, the place where we would be in learning and design together to support the flow of life. Yeah.
So, and I know you've got more, but I also wanted to ask, there's when we set about ordering the way that we would move through the model in this course, for the first time in your work, we came to starting from the whole. And there's such a inclination to try to build up from the parts, but what's that been like, and what is the meaning of that for you?
Thank you. So it's very interesting, because not only in years past did I start with the parts and work through then how can we connect to each other, and how can we serve something bigger than ourselves, and finally how could we make all of that self-organizing. This is how I used to teach this and work with clients, but I noticed that we never fully found our way to a life-aligned worldview that way. And we never got beyond sort of the debate of what's mine and I'm going to defend it. So it's been really powerful and exciting to explore in the opposite order. And this framework that's on the screen was reversed so that the starting point was contribution and structure and mastery. So in the same way, it was starting with the concrete because that's so comfortable for us, and adding on at the end what I was calling a heroic cause for a long time, and story and meaning. But these things have to be the ground. They have to be the starting point, trusting that we are part of that somehow. So it's been really exciting and much more powerful to go in this order.
Right. So we come to the meaning, the membership, and the mastery, all nested within the larger purpose of that we were born into, that we live within, and that everything we do is in relationship with. So such a different way of looking at not how do I converge with, but and there's a sort of an overall sense of the whole model where, I mean, obviously you're in every part of the model, you're moving away from any sense of the world as a machine that can be managed. But this is also a learning community, in which the individuality is always in relationship and in inquiry and in commitment.
Exactly. Living and learning seem to be synonyms. So this is a model of living organizations. That means it's a model of learning organizations. The purpose is to be in learning. In other words, to be in aliveness and unfolding and flow at every level. And we have this common phrase, be the change. And there's such pressure on young people and on all of us really to change the world. I want to change the world. And there is such pressure in it, and it's impossible in some ways. The world is big and complex, and it sets us up for almost a violent orientation, that it starts with me and I am here to change you mostly, and instead, a friend of mine offered the reframe, cherish the world. And I feel like that's where we've started from in this course. How do we cherish life and the world and ourselves, and engage with it from that place of reverence and responsibility, and responsiveness to the healing and wholeness that are ripe for emergence?
The and ourselves is such a gift. It is so rarely heard within this kind of work that if we are not ourselves coming alive in the work we're doing and loving life, how can it be the right work? There's such a temptation in a sort of call to martyrdom and rightness and purpose, and it may be right and it may be the right purpose, but that the beauty of even in these images, we've got all of the clasped hands. We've got a whole community that's come together, standing in a circle around a transformative piece of art that they created that changed their own neighborhood. We've got the dance of play with the power of the water that takes minimal effort to have a maximum play and enjoyment in coming down a river. And I love the membership photo there, because we were both there, and in the moment for me of having kind of come back alive and saying in my journal, probably on that day, saying I have found my tribe, in terms of who in the world wanted to work in that spirit of collaboration, of inquiry, and mutual.
And it's where your poetry found permission, right?
Yes.
And it seems to me that it's part of the practice of aligning with life. When you bring your poetry in, it seems to invite life into the conversation. What do you think?
Yes, and I hadn't written poems in a while before that, and we went on a walk around this small island that we were on, and I wrote down one phrase that each person said as each of us was invited to introduce ourselves to the group walking around the island, and those phrases together became the poem. And the first two lines of the poem were, much like this course, an architecture of time to open and explore. And that's what we've done in living through this course together, with this group of committed people from all over the world. Together seek purpose and calling and community and contribution through our individual stories and systems and structures, and finding our own place in that, our own thread of meaning that can connect with others, and seek ever deepening mastery. And I've so enjoyed this part of the course where we're listening to the students describe where and why they are choosing to work and what their questions are.
I want to mention Chris's story from yesterday, because it's such a nice example of these design principles and these fertile conditions. So the project that he mentioned was, it came from a group of facilitators and consultants that he's part of. And somehow they all were sensing the calling to name the possibility of civilizational collapse. This is one of many things calling to them and to many of us. And so somehow the group nominated him to make the contribution of a paper. I said, Chris, you should write a paper. And it should be aimed at some vague, undescribed community of people who need to hear this. We will change them through this paper so that they are aware. And as Chris described the project that had gone for a year and more, and that it just wasn't flowing, he went off by himself to write and then brought it back to the group. And they said, no, that's not it. Go back and write some more. And so he did and brought it back to the group. And he said, eventually, there seems to be an energetic block. It's just not flowing. And so we all together asked him, where is it alive in you? How does it connect with your story? Tell us, go back to the beginning, to 1982, which he did, when he first noticed his own story and his own observations. And he talked about projects where there is flow and co-creation, and the community is very clearly defined, others who have been called to that work. And he described interactions that are filled with movement, where he feels masterful as a facilitator. So it all started to really become clear what was needed. It was a beautiful story, and it served all of us. Somehow those are universal questions as well.
Yes, and there's so much in there about how could any one artifact created by any one person be the thing in such a complex, overwhelming collective time of challenge and crisis. But what it could be is an invitation. And so he was saying towards the end of what he was saying and hearing, that he feels a call to conversation about it. And that is so freeing if what you're creating is an artifact that is then to be explored, rather than that has to be complete and perfect somehow in and of itself. And particularly in a time when people are going to have such different stages of reaction to the overwhelming question of civilizational collapse.
That's it. This community word really might be conversation. I often list a whole bunch of words that happily start with the letter C: community, conversation, co-creation, because that's what's happening here in a living system. It's never just an artifact or a transaction.
Yes, and it's such a calling to call a conversation. The conversation deepens the community.
Yeah, you and I have the Art of Hosting community in common. There's Toka Muller, who is one of the core global stewards, and I heard from him first that it may be that learning is the leadership that is needed. And you've shared a Peter Block quote.
That leadership is convening, but those are so interrelated,
aren't they? Yeah. So I wonder if you have a short story from your own experience of these patterns, from your own life or from Peterborough pollinators that we've heard quite a lot about.
Yeah, let me share one that we may not get a chance to share otherwise, which is, and it relates directly to how we worked in beautifully creative, collaborative divergence. Nice. We would meet weekly for particularly the first 2 years of the group. We spent a lot of time together, and that was delight in each other's company. But every time we gathered, we would start with a check-in, and then the next question was, what's an aha or insight you've had since we last met that feels related to what we're doing together? And we would often spend a lot of time in that stage with people telling stories of some immediate encounter they'd just had and what very fresh. So it was always alive and in the moment, the conversation that we were having. And then the next question, if we got past that one, was what's alive in your work? And there's a your that's individual, but the your work was nested within the larger wholeness of the purpose of the pollinators, which was both to create pollinator habitat in the city, but also to explore working in the way that pollinators work, to be emergent with minimal structure, and always like bees following the scent of the nectar and coming back in delight to tell the others with their little bee dance where the good patch is. That's what we were doing every week. So we quickly came into a lot of doing, a lot of projects, a lot of gardens, a lot of things happened in schoolyards. We did educational workshops, all sorts of things, but we were never planning too far ahead. And we never had to agree on or completely plan just one thing. We had partly formed in an open space technology sort of process where the way that works is anyone in a group can say, here's the conversation I want to have, or here's the idea I want to pursue. And then those interested in that would go there and work on that for a while and come back and either feel called to do it or not, either of which was perfectly fine. So we often ended up doing multiple things at once. And my favorite times in the whole life of the group are when other people wanted to do things that didn't call me, that I wondered whether they were the right energy for the moment, and they turned out to be brilliant or absolutely essential to the next stage of what I wanted to work on. And sometimes a group would be just one person with a particular skill and everyone else saying, go, go, go. I did a photography exhibit at one point that included some of my nature photography. There were a couple of others who were photographers as well. And that was a project where it allowed the pollinators as a group and project to interface with a community-wide photography festival that lasted a month and that had 60 shows all over the city on wildly different themes. So it brought together two worlds, and our show was outside and in gardens and involved taking a walk. It was called Making the Invisible Visible, and it allowed people sometimes to see the life that was right in front of their faces if they stopped to look, because the photos were sometimes displayed right where they were taken. That's just an example of something that group enabled, that an individual person did within the group, that just got a yes, which didn't involve committee meetings. We never had anything that felt remotely like a committee meeting. We never appointed anyone to be president or treasurer. There was so little structure actually needed. Most of it would have just got in the way. And the gifts of each person flourished. And one last thing, which is that we re-met at least once a year in a community-wide summit, the purpose of which was not to recruit more volunteers for the things we were already doing. It was to reimagine the whole thing with the new energy of whoever came. So there was this constant, fresh divergence that allowed genuinely you coming into that event with your new idea to spark such delight. And we had not made commitments far out into the future. So you might get a yes to some amazing thing. And have it happen quickly.
I love it. What a great story. What a great experience. And I'm hearing that this story was really essential, that we are here to support pollinator gardens, but also to be together in a way that is like pollinators, to be in flexible learning together and delight in each other's company and each other's gifts. That was kind of the story that held you together, and that you purposely chose to have the lightest possible structure. You didn't incorporate, you didn't become a nonprofit with a board of directors. You had just enough structure of weekly meetings and an annual gathering, and you had systems like the guiding questions. What is an aha or an insight? And an open space as a method of meeting to support you coming together in community, and also to support your full divergence.
Yes.
All of it. Yeah. All of it.
And there's a mirror structure of that. We came in with the check-in and the what's your aha and insight. And then there's the group part in the middle. And we would sometimes very late in the meeting get down to all of a sudden a whole bunch of things would get decided would be done, or we would figure out who was going to meet next. But the checkout question was always back to the individual. Is what are you going to go and do next? And that could be a very individual thing. So parts, wholes, back to parts. And somehow the magic of it is that the parts of each of us individually stayed whole within the larger whole of the purpose.
And it seems to me it's because you designed that space of interaction and infrastructure to support flow,
Yes.
That's how you could dance back and forth between parts and wholeness.
Yes. Yes. We felt the aliveness when we were gathering. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does not. Beautiful things don't have to feel like work.
Yeah.
Or the parts of them that feel like work have such purpose that is derived from the life and community of the whole that they don't feel like work.
That's beautiful. Well, I wonder if there's any last thing we feel that people need to hear. That seems like a nice bow right there in your story, like a bow on the gift. What else?
I wanted to come back just to your words that you used several times in the course of walking through the model of this isn't about managing the outcome. It's about cultivating the fertile conditions, which is so different. It's so gentle. It's so careful of the living system. So understanding of the way life happens in a complex living system rather than in a machine of parts.
Thank you for pointing to that. I agree.
So you get to talk to some people across Europe over the next little while, which is
I
wonderful.
do. I've got kind of 4 talks in 4 days. So wish me luck.
Wish you luck.
Yeah, but it's a good thing. That I think the times have changed and I don't feel lonely anymore. I feel that there are many, many others. And part of what I'm going to say in the 4th talk, which is a TEDx about what have we learned during the pandemic. And I feel that the pandemic has taught the entire population, the human population has had a crash course in living systems thinking. And not everyone has taken it in, but I believe there's a critical mass now who's able to see not only the parts, but the relationships and the emergent wholeness and life's precious self-organization. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that now we're more equipped to make wise and courageous choices together.
Yes, may it be so.
All right. Thanks, Ben. I think that's good.
Thanks to you.
See you.